You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
No, this is a 5-year program, but if you start cutting and the tax credits out of it, it's going to have a chilling effect on donors down the road. And right now they're showing very good success within 2 years of families participating in this program. And this was a deal that was crafted between 4 legislative leaders. And I come from a world where a deal is a deal.
And joining us now is Democratic State Senator Andy Manar, a top budget negotiator for the Senate Democrats. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Can I get your reaction to Leader Durkin's comment there? He says a deal's a deal and that Governor Pritzker should not take out that final piece to the education funding formula that you pushed for so many years. Do you support Governor Pritzker's plan to do this, to phase out this program faster? And is that reneging on a deal?
Well, no, I don't think it is. So there's multiple steps that have to happen. Keep in mind, Mark, that yesterday's budget submission is step number 1, and that's a proposal that Governor Pritzker put out on the table. Here's what I'd like to do is, there hasn't ever been a single public hearing in this building on that tax credit proposal. That was forced onto us by Governor Rauner as a way to get him to sign school funding that he had previously vetoed. And once he figured out that was a mistake, he came up with this tax credit program as a way to get his signature on a bill. So I would say the steps in between where we are and where Governor Pritzker wants to take us is a set of public hearings. I think we should dive into how much money is being spent, where's the money coming from, who is truly benefiting. I would tell you right now that if you look at the program, from data that I've seen, it's pennies on the dollar going to communities in downstate, which is not what the program promoted itself as. So I would favor this. Let's have a set of public hearings on this issue for the first time ever, and then let's make some decisions about the program.
Yes, and that's somewhat in keeping with, I believe, what I recall were your remarks on the floor of the Senate when it was time to cast the deciding vote on this, and you urged some of your colleagues in the Democratic caucus to give this the time to see if it shakes out and if it's effective, and that was the full 5-year plan. That was the deal at the time. Now the governor's saying, let's cut that into 3 years.
Take another component of the bill that now is in motion, which is the property tax relief component. There's clearly some outliers that were a result of that. That has to be changed too. So that's not reneging on part of the school funding deal. So what I'm interested in doing is making sure that the law that we passed is exercised and is executed in the way that it was intended. There's nothing wrong with having a public hearing about how that tax credit money came into the state and how it went out the door and where it went. Let's have that public conversation. I'd also say in the debate that that program should be put under the same tests and scrutiny that I had to go through for 5 years to forge bipartisan majorities to get school funding passed. There's a mismatch there.
Sure.
So I'm for more transparency and sunlight. I think that is the next step in this conversation. And by the way, that should happen whether or not Governor Pritzker puts a proposal on the table. That is a tax expenditure to the tune of about $50 million so far.
Right,
and that's...
Because of that, we can move on because it's a very small part of the bigger budget, and I want to get onto some other parts of that as well. Perhaps the biggest piece of Governor Pritzker's budget being balanced is this deferment on paying into the pensions by $800 million now. Is that a big gamble that one day maybe the progressive income tax will come through and then he can afford to reverse this decision? Or have you heard from him? How is he justifying making this move that so many critics have said, we've tried this in the past and it ends up costing taxpayers of the future a lot more money?
Well, let me tell you what else we've tried in the past. This is what the governor didn't say. He didn't put on the table yesterday a proposal that was undoubtedly unconstitutional, that was never committed to language, let alone passed by the legislature, and then claimed billions of dollars in savings in the state budget just to check a box and say, I balanced the budget. That's what we saw from his predecessor.
He didn't do the first.
No.
It's constitutionally sound, but this does check the balanced budget by saying we're borrowing all this money. Is it actuarially sound? Is it good financial policy?
It is actuarially sound. And I think it's a mischaracterization to say that extending the ramp that was put in place in 1994, a year after I graduated high school, is somehow something that we have to adhere to and not have a conversation about the pros and cons of managing a budget under the construct of a pension payment that is growing and growing and growing. So I think it's a mischaracterization to say that the extension of the ramp results in $800 million worth of savings. The 5 points that he put forward result in that savings in this current fiscal or this coming fiscal year.
One of those 5 points is passive progressive income tax, put that on the ballot, but that's revenue a year and a half,
That
2
would
years
be
from now.
2 years from now, fully,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, so part of that pension savings was making permanent this pension buyback, or that was a Governor Rauner proposal, right? That was something he proposed.
It was
supported.
yeah.
And
That was part of the bipartisan
that in.
budget this current year. Yes.
Okay. On education as well, I want to shift over to that side. That was a big part of the governor's new and I guess extra spending. He's keeping the statutorily required funding for K through 12, but adding a little bit on extra. What did you see? Things that you liked from this governor's spending plan?
Yeah, I think, let's start with early childhood education and K through 12 spending. Having the governor on day one put a marker down for the next down payment on our trek toward equity is without question a positive for getting money to underfunded school districts and relieving pressure for school districts to raise property taxes. So that's a big plus without question. And then the governor's investment that he calls for in early childhood education, we know that investment pays dividends for years to come. That's going to be tough to do because we have so many other pressures, but I support it, and the key now is to make sure that we have a budget that pays for it.
So I believe the governor's proposal, which again is not law yet, but it calls for an additional $25 million on top of the $350 million that has to go to these school districts. Do you have a sense yet, in talking to school districts in your area, how much of that $25